Oh, welcome back. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Anne and Martin. We've already got some lovely emails coming in. We'll go through them a bit later on. Actually, sticking up for you as a sunbed hogger.
Oh, nice.
Apparently, according to Grant, at Sandals, if you go to Sandals, the resort, if you have a butler, apparently you can pay for a butler. You can get your butlers going to the sunbeds at 6 a.m. and putting towels and books on them and hogging them for you. And you can have a little reserved sign, apparently.
How the other half cheat.
And Grant says tips count, if you get my drift. Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I send the kids, they're free.
I'd love to have a butler service.
Butler at Sandals?
Yeah, very posh.
I got called ignorant and scummy earlier.
Yes, but if you've got a butler, you're not ignorant or scummy, you're just rich.
You're a posh hog.
Shall we have a look at the front pages of the Sunday papers for you? Let's go to the Sunday Telegraph first. China will use electric cars to spy on Britain. That's one to think about.
Nice bit of conspiracy. And in the Express, as we've been talking about already this morning, sabotage. That's the accusation against Keir Starmer that he's trying to stop plans to stop the boat.
Meanwhile, The Independent accuses the Tories of cooking the books to cut official asylum numbers.
And the sensational Soaraway Star reveals a shiny ball of fire has been spotted in the sky. I know, a strange thing, saying summer is finally set to arrive with a 30-degree heat blast. And those are your front pages.
Right, let's look inside, or all around them, actually. Now, joining us this morning, editor of Spiked, Tom Slater, and author and broadcaster, Nikki Hodgson. Thanks very much for joining us. First of all, are either of you a sunbed hogger?
Nikki, come on.
Tom and I were having a chat about this in the green room, weren't we? Well,
go on,
I'm not, but what I was saying is I don't like it when people leave the towel on for the whole day. I don't mind the morning banking it and being on it, but then when they leave the whole afternoon, and being British, I find it so hard, you know, I could just technically take it off and put my own on, couldn't I, and use it, but I don't feel able to do that, and I feel really resentful.
Yeah.
I did it recently, 2 weeks ago, when I was in Greece for a few days. I sat there seething, looking at bed, I was thinking, you're not coming back, but I can't take it.
And like a true Brit, you did absolutely nothing about it.
I sat there scheming in my own head.
I can't bring myself to do it now. I can't, you know, deploy children or butlers or anyone else in between. It just feels... Because I, like Nicky, would be the person seething with rage.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. It can spoil your holiday. Right, Tom, though, take us to the front page of the Telegraph about the fact that if we're all going to buy electric cars, and we could possibly be buying them from China, we could face a problem.
Yeah, so concerns have been raised with ministers about this because of the fact we have this target to make sure that no new diesel or petrol cars are sold by 2030. The problem is there isn't the domestic production to build these things. There's been a few gigafactories, as they're called, pop up, but not nearly enough. At the moment, we're buying a lot of them from Germany, but it seems like China are really roaring ahead in this particular area. And so it would be expected that many of the cars that would be bought to meet this target would be from China. The issue with this, of course, is not just electric cars, but a lot of cars in general have all kinds of technology in them. They have these things called cellular modules, which are tracking your location data. They can record audio. There's all sorts of different functions. And the concern being that this could be in some way harvested, hijacked, even some concerns about being able to just kind of shut off a nation's cars, etc. It's worth saying that at the moment this is kind of speculation about what might happen. But at the same time, it's kind of meeting those concerns about saying, ultimately, do you really want to be overly reliant on any kind of external actor, particularly an authoritarian state, for something which is a key part of your infrastructure, which this, of course, would be?
On the one hand, it's a slight kind of silly season conspiracy theory story. On the other hand, though, Nikki, it's true to say that while the world was asleep at the wheel, pun intended, China hoovered up most of the world's lithium, now makes most of the world's batteries, so they're absolutely strategically placed to make this sort of move.
Yeah, but I mean, we had this story. Do you remember when Huawei, when Huawei phones were first introduced, and people were like, "Oh, don't buy one because you're being spied upon." You know, every time we have a story about China providing us with some kind of technology, we revisit this theme. You know, most recently we've been talking about TikTok and whether we should be on that. So it's frustrating, actually, that it kind of keeps coming round, because actually what we really want is the evidence. Are we being spied on by China? I mean, how much do we know about the information that's being passed back? I mean, interesting, there was that story recently about Tesla. Do you remember Tesla employees that had been recirculating footage of people from their cars in the office? So we know that there are humans behind the technology who are potentially viewing the material. And so from that point of view, well, that's actually quite realistic as a concern, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I just think what we really need is there's a lot of speculation at the minute about China and what China can see us do, and we need some more facts about what is actually happening.
I think that's a really important point as well, because a lot of it is sheer speculation. The one thing that I'm always struck by in these areas is that the way we get ourselves into a situation where on a particular type of tech or a particular type of resource, we're overly reliant on, say, just one state.
Yeah.
We saw that in relation to Russia and Europe, obviously, and we see it in relation to China and a lot of tech currently. And a lot of concerns over Taiwan, because if China ever invaded Taiwan, that's where the vast majority of the microchips that are in almost everything we own these days come
And when
from.
you think of the fact that we're already talking about self-driving cars, you know, cars that we'll just call up on an app and they'll come to your front door and you just get in the back, read the paper on the way to work. That, if some state decided to shut that down completely because they'd put a chip in that car, I mean, can you? It would not just be inconvenient; it could be deadly. So we're right to heed this warning, aren't we?
And just being overly reliant on any kind of one external actor, I think, poses a problem. Whether or not they're going to exploit these problems, or even if they're just going to, for other reasons, not be able to supply you with that good at a certain point, it's obviously not good policy.
Should we move on, Nikki, to an FOI request by the Mail on Sunday into the ongoing scandal, of course, kick-started by Nigel Farage, GBNEWS, when he had his bank account terminated by Coutts. But now it's been revealed in this FOI, 1 million bank accounts have been shut since 2019.
Yeah, so the Mail on Sunday's obviously done an investigation off the back of what happened to Farage, and it's kind of looking into the people that have been debanked. Now, it's important to talk about being debanked is different to being unbanked. We've got a lot of unbanked people in this country, so it's people that have never had a bank account and that, you know, they're vulnerable for lots of different reasons. But being debanked is when the bank actively decides to shut your accounts, and for any number of reasons, which are often only privy to the bank. You know, you're
they don't have to tell you why.
They don't have to tell you why, and it seems that it's very subjective, the decisions that some of the banks are making. It's quite interesting that Chancellor Jeremy Hunt has said that he was refused a bank account with Monzo, the online bank. I've got an account with them, actually. And he said he was refused it because of his public profile. So it's not just... I think there's this attitude that it's the old-fashioned bank, because it was Coutts, you know, it's banks of heritage that are making these decisions. Actually, no, new banks are just as likely to do it. So we obviously need to really understand why they make these decisions, because there must be internal documents about why a bank account has been shut, obviously, because at the end of the day, banks want to make money, and if someone's got money, they're more likely to take it than not. But I mean, I find this interesting because a few years ago, I was working in America. Martin, you'll remember this. I was writing a lot about the sex industry and about the porn industry, and one of the stories that I kind of wrote about there was how people who worked in the adult industry routinely had their bank accounts closed by American banks like Wells Fargo, gold rush banks, you know, not exactly banks that were set up with ethical money, let's say. And that was kind of a really interesting story, but because it was strictured to such a sort of maybe a group that is kind of marginalised anyway in society, people never really cared. So, I mean, I'm interested kind of like following on from that. When you see sort of everyday people or political figures or, you know, people that society considers to be more prestigious being debanked, then it becomes really worrying. And I just think it's the fact that the banks are making decisions that you don't know about. And also the point that's made in this article is... AI, again, is making a lot of automatic decisions about who should have an account and who shouldn't. And I've always found that with banking, that the fact, you know, the past sort of 10, 20 years, the fact that you can't talk to a person very easily at all, especially about complicated things like personal loans and stuff like that.
And it's an astonishing increase because the previous amount they had was only 343,000. That's still a lot of accounts.
Yeah, it is.
But a third the number. So we've seen a tripling of this phenomenon. Astonishing
So
stuff.
according to this, the banks have closed 1 million accounts in just over 4 years. But the rate of closures is accelerating. So
that's
what
what we've got
is
to watch.
going on?
Yeah, we've got to really find out
for
why.
all of those people who said, "Oh, it's just Nigel Farage talking about Nigel Farage," it is so much bigger than one person.
And it's going to be a big problem for them as well when you see those Facebook groups popping up about people who've been debanked. They're all sharing how to do subject access requests, as Nigel Farage did, to find out why. This is going to be a big problem for the banks because they're going to their own process is going to be gunged up with people trying to ask, understandably so, why has this happened? But they've only got themselves to blame.
I wonder if there'll ever be a case like with the personal loan thing, where actually money will come into this. Whether if you've been debanked, you can actually prove that it's affected you,
absolutely
affected your business. You could actually sort of sue for compensation.
I think that could well be the way it's going.
It really
some sort of class action.
Absolutely.
And what I think is going to be an emerging strand of this story is they're cancelling people who trade in cash. Because they don't want people to have cash, you know. It can't be. It can be hidden. It can't be taxed. It can be. And I think that's going to be a big sort of run-of-the-mill window cleaners, chip shop owners are being debanked because the banks don't want us to have cash.
Absolutely.
So it's one to watch.
Absolutely. One more. We've got time, I think, just for one more. Look at the universities in crisis because lecturers and students are going on strike.
Yes, so this is just the ongoing crisis, which has really been non-stop since 2020, really, where you had, first of all, you had the COVID years. You had students who were paying those exorbitant fees, and yet they were locked up in their halls of residence, only really taught on Zoom. On top of that, you then obviously had the universities' lecturers' strikes action, which on the one hand, these people are suffering on the cost of living crisis like anyone else. Junior academics in particular have not had a real particularly fair shake. Like many areas of the economy, they have also had kind of real terms pay cuts over the course of the past 12, 15 years anyway. But the problem is you combine that with the experience of the COVID years, and students are understandably quite upset given the fact that they're, as we've seen in recent weeks, graduating without even having a grade necessarily. All of these kind of problems. So there's now 140,000 students at 17 universities who have joined a class action looking for compensation.
You can't blame them, can you?
You can't blame Nikki. I mean, people pay £9,000 a year during lockdown to be locked in their hall of residence, staring at a screen. Thinking, where's the VFM here? And now, read the room lecturers, they're going on strike to further kind of rob students of their education. It makes you wonder if they're completely out of touch with the educational needs of the students.
Well, I think what's interesting is, I come from a family of educators, not necessarily university workers, but what's interesting is, I absolutely defend their right to strike and to kind of argue for better conditions and terms for themselves. But I think it belongs to kind of a previous era of being a lecturer, because the business model of universities has changed so much now that surely lecturers have to approach how they strike differently as well, if that makes sense. So I think, I think they're not likely to get much public sympathy, to be honest.
No,
That's not a reason not to strike, but, it's important to remember.
Nikki Hodgson, Tom Slater, superb. Great talk today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yeah, absolutely.